we are with Witness for Peace. Who here has heard of Witness for Peace? That's about as high a percentage as I've seen at any event. Great. When and where did we get started as Witness for Peace?
1980.
Close. That right decade. 1983. What country?
Nicaragua.
Nicaragua. What was going on in Nicaragua in 1983? Contra War. And what was the U.S.'s role in that whole thing?
Help the Contras.
We were supplying the Contras. Right. Just to make sure we're all on the same page. So the way we got started was with Witness for Peace was a group of folks much like yourselves in 1983 reading their morning paper. You would read a lot of things from our friend Ronald Reagan at that point. He said a lot on the front page of the paper saying that these guys, the Contras, were freedom fighters. He said they're the moral equivalent to our founding fathers. If you turn that paper over in 1983, you'd read reports from groups like Amnesty International that reported on the gross human rights violations that these guys were committing. Killing of innocent civilians, torture. I lived in Nicaragua for 3 years, and I have friends who have family members who were taken out of their houses, shot in daylight by the Contras, leaving their bodies there to rot in the public square. So this is the kind of thing people are reading about in 1983, and this is the kind of contradiction they couldn't just sit with. To know that this was being done in our name as U.S. citizens and as it became known with our taxpayer dollars. So they decided they had to go down and see for themselves. Go to Nicaragua. See with their own eyes, hear with their own ears, what were the impacts of U.S. policy, what were the day-to-day effects of this funding of the Contras, and people very bluntly told them what it was like to live under that kind of fear, day in, day out, and what it was like to know that the United States government was behind all of it. And so they decided this had to be a much bigger thing. They came back to the United States and they got 100 people to go back with them to Nicaragua. Those 100 people got bluntly told about the impacts of U.S. policy. They went back to the United States and got thousands upon thousands of people coming down in delegation after delegation throughout the 1980s, every single one going with that same initial objective of seeing really what are the day-to-day impacts of U.S. policies, and everyone coming back to spread that education and to advocate for meaningful policy change. And we got that when it became illegal to fund the Contras in the mid-'80s. Yay. Then, since then, we've expanded quite a bit. We've opened up an office in Mexico, in Colombia. We've started taking delegations to Cuba, to Haiti, to Venezuela, to Bolivia. But every single one has maintained that same initial purpose. What is going on in Latin America in our name with our tax dollars? We take people where it's actually happening so that they can see that firsthand, come back, educate others, and advocate for change. Now, during the 80s, during these wars, a lot of people were fleeing. Nicaragua, fleeing Guatemala, El Salvador, all these Central American wars. And then in the 90s, the war ended. But the fleeing did not. Migration rates actually not only did not end, they increased after the wars ended. So we were faced with a pretty crucial question. Why? What are they fleeing? What could be worse than war? Yes. This question of why people migrate is an essential question, yet a question that's not often discussed in the ongoing migration debate here. The question of why you, why I, why your friends, why anyone would want to leave their family, the language they speak, the community they grew up in, the food they like to eat, to go across, make a risky journey across international borders in a desert where several hundred people die every year, to go get jobs where they're likely to be exploited in a community that they don't know, where they don't speak your language. It doesn't make much sense unless you ask that question of why. What pushes migration? To address this question, we are honored to have here with us today Paola Gutierrez Galindo, for whom this question is anything but theoretical. For her, this question is personal. About 90% of Paola's own family has now migrated north. She's a community organizer in the south of Oaxaca, and in south of Mexico in the state of Oaxaca. And as a community organizer, she works in many communities that have been left vacant now by migration. So she's come to address what for her is a first-hand, day-to-day reality, and to shed some light on that crucial question of why. And to interpret for her is Betty Marin, who we're honored to have here as part of our Mexico team, so that we can all understand what Paola says. So please give them your rapt attention.
Ya ven, lo dijo. Mi nombre es Paola Gutiérrez Galindo y vengo de una organización que se llama Frente Indígena en la Lucha por la Equidad, en colaboración con Acción Permanente por la Paz.
Ben has already said, my name is Paula Gutierrez Galindo and I come from an organization called the Indigenous Front in the Struggle for Equity, which is in Oaxaca, and I'm here in collaboration with Witness for Peace.
Y vengo de una comunidad que se llama San Lorenzo Victoria. Es una comunidad que se encuentra en la región mixteca de Oaxaca, México.
And I come from a community called San Lorenzo Victoria, which is located in the Mixteca region of the state of Oaxaca.
Mi padre, voy a empezar con la historia de mi familia. Mi padre, desde que me acuerdo, ha migrado a Estados Unidos por periodos, viniéndose a trabajar 6, 8 meses y regresándose a la casa de 6 a 4 meses.
So I'll start off by talking about the story of my family, and my father has migrated as far as I can remember since, for many years now, and he's migrated for periods at a time where he's working in the States for 6 to 8 months and then returning home for 6 or 4 months.
Y mi madre también migró durante su juventud. Ahora por la familia, ella está en la casa.
My mother also migrated during her youth, and now because of her family, she's returned home.
Y somos 5 hermanos, de los cuales la hermana mayor, se vino a Estados Unidos hace 13 años. Hace 10 años que no la vemos. Ella se vino indocumentada, no puede regresar a México. Si regresa a México, tal vez se separe de sus hijos y ya no pueda regresar con sus hijos acá en Estados Unidos.
So we are 5 brothers and sisters, and one of my sisters, my oldest sister, migrated, and she left to the U.S. 13 years ago, and it's been 10 years since we last saw her. She is undocumented, and so she can't return to the return to Mexico, because that would mean separating from her children, and if she did that, there's a possibility she couldn't come back into the U.S.
Y mi hermano también a los 18 años se vino a Estados Unidos a trabajar. Al poco tiempo, 5 años después, regresó al pueblo, se casó y nuevamente se vino a Estados Unidos en búsqueda de un empleo para el sustento de su hija y de su esposa. Desgraciadamente, cuando él estaba acá, su esposa dejó la casa y a la niña en la casa. Él se tuvo que regresar a México.
My brother also migrated when he was 18 years old. He worked in the States for about 5 years, and then he returned and married, and then, felt the need to return to sustain his wife and his daughter. Unfortunately, while he was gone, his wife left him and left his daughter at home, so now he's returned to the community.
Y esta historia de mi familia ya no la seguí yo. No quise venirme de mi pueblo a trabajar a Estados Unidos, pero tuve que salir a migrar a la ciudad más cercana, que estaba a 7 horas, para poder estudiar y trabajar al mismo tiempo, al igual que mis hermanas.
So this is the story of my family, and I chose not to continue this story. I didn't want to leave my community, but I did migrate to the closest city to our community, which is 7 hours away, and I did that so that I could study, so that I could work and study. And my other sisters also did this.
Esto que pasa en mi familia y que pasó en la familia de mi madre, porque de los 12 hermanos que tiene mi madre, solamente ella está en el pueblo, los demás están acá en Estados Unidos. Es lo que pasa comúnmente en mi pueblo.
So what's happening in my family what's happening in my mother's family, which is she is one of 12 brothers and sisters, and she's the only one who remains in the community, and everybody else has gone to the United States. So this is commonly happening throughout my community.
Y a través de el trabajo con las organizaciones en las que he colaborado, me he dado cuenta que no solamente es en mi comunidad donde pasa este fenómeno, es en muchas comunidades de la Mixteca, en otras comunidades de Oaxaca y en tantas comunidades de México.
So through my work with organizations, collaboration with organizations, I've learned that this is not only happening in my community, but it's happening in many other communities in the Mixteca region, others in the state of Oaxaca, and also very many in the entire country.
Como les dije anteriormente, yo me acuerdo que cuando era niña solamente los hombres se venían a Estados Unidos a trabajar y bien o mal se regresaban con su familia. Ahora las cosas han cambiado, ya no solamente se vienen los hombres, también se vienen las mujeres, también se vienen los niños y están migrando familias enteras a Estados Unidos.
So like I mentioned, when I was younger, I remember only men were migrating. And for better or for worse, they were returning to their families. And now things have changed. Now not only the men are migrating, but also the women, and also children, and sometimes entire families.
Y de acuerdo a las cifras del 2000, del 100% de los migrantes, el 55% eran hombres y el 45% mujeres.
According to statistics from the year 2000, of 100% of migrants, 55% were men and 45% were women.
Igual del 100%, más del 50% estaban entre la edad de 15 y 24 años. Por eso les decía yo que generalmente terminan la secundaria y se vienen a Estados Unidos.
And also, of 100% of migrants, more than 50% are between the ages of 15 and 24 years old, which generally means that as soon as they graduate middle school, they're migrating.
Y en Oaxaca, la migración en el 2000 se aceleró tanto que hubo un año en el que se llegaron a migrar hasta 250,000 personas en un solo año.
And in Oaxaca, migration, this is also a stat from 2000, migration accelerated so much that it reached a point where in just 1 year, 250,000 people left the state of Oaxaca, migrated.
Y se estimaba en esos años, 2000-2004, que aproximadamente había en California 500,000 oaxaqueños viviendo.
And it was also estimated during this time, sometime between 2000 and 2004, that there were 500,000 Oaxacans living in California.
Y anteriormente, la gente de la región mixteca migraba principalmente a los estados del norte, a los campos agrícolas en los estados del norte de mismo México. Después, la ruta de la migración cambió a los estados de Estados Unidos, los que están sobre frontera, California, Arizona, entre otros. Y actualmente la ruta de migración está cambiando. Hay gente que se está viniendo a Arkansas, a Washington, a Nueva York, Carolina del Norte, a Illinois, a Iowa y a Florida.
So previously, people from the Mixteca region of Oaxaca were primarily migrating to the northern part of the country, to the agricultural fields in the northern part of Mexico. Those routes changed a bit where they were entering into the border states of the United States, like California and Arizona. And today, the routes have changed even more, where people are migrating to states like Arkansas, Washington, New York, North Carolina, Illinois, Iowa and Florida.
Y este es el mapa del estado de Oaxaca y está compuesto por 7 regiones de las cuales 4 están catalogadas con alta migración.
So this is a map of the state of Oaxaca, and it's divided into 7 regions, and 4 of those are marked with high rates of migration.
Entre los cuales está la Mixteca, de donde yo vengo, la que está pintada de rojo. Y ahí está compuesto por 5 distritos, 4 distritos con alta marginación, y casualmente es la región donde se encuentra uno de los municipios más pobres de México.
Amongst these regions is the Mixteca region, where I'm from, and it's the region that's painted in red. And the Mixteca region is composed of 5 districts, and 4 of those districts are ones with high marginalization. And you also have in the Mixteca region some of the poorest municipalities in the whole country.
Y generalmente acá en Estados Unidos hay algunas personas que se preguntan por qué migran, y otras tantas arremeten en contra de los migrantes, porque según les vienen a quitar el trabajo o porque vienen de delincuentes. De entrada les puedo decir que no es por gusto, que no creo que un padre quiera separarse de sus hijos, o una madre quiera separarse de sus hijos, o una mujer quiera separarse de sus hermanos, de sus padres, de su familia.
So generally people ask the question, why do they migrate? And others actually don't ask this, but act against migrants and accuse them of taking their jobs and accuse them of being delinquents. Well, to start, I'd like to say that we're not migrating because we want to. I don't know of a father who would want to separate from his children, or a mother who would want to separate from her children, or a woman who would want to separate from her brothers and sisters, from her parents, from her family.
Y generalmente las causas de la migración son por problemas laborales, buscando un empleo, buscando una mejor condición de vida para sus hijos, como para él o para la persona que migra, y por la pobreza que existe en los lugares de donde vienen las personas.
So generally the causes of migration are employment issues, the search for employment, the search for better living conditions for themselves and for their families, and also the poverty in the places where people are coming from.
Y consecuencia de las 3 primeras causas, que son los orígenes de la migración, viene la otra causa, que es la búsqueda de unión familiar. Si ya se vino el papá, generalmente se viene la mamá. Si se viene la mamá, generalmente se vienen los niños. ¿Y cuántas historias no hay de niños que vienen buscando a sus padres y que a veces llegan a encontrarlos acá y a veces se quedan en el camino?
So, of these first 3 causes, which are the origins of migration, as a consequence you have this other cause, which is family reunification. Generally, when you have a father leaving, migrating, you also have the mother following, and generally when that happens, you have the children following the mother. And we know how many stories I've heard of children who have gone searching for their parents, and some of them find them, and some of them, don't make it.
Y ahí están las cifras. Generalmente se vienen por cuestiones laborales en su mayoría, y después de las cuestiones laborales por cuestiones familiares.
So here are the percentages. So you see that the majority are coming for employment issues, and then following that is family issues.
Y las 3 primeras causas que enumeré primero se deben a un problema económico en el país de origen.
And the first 3 causes that I listed are due to an economic problem in the country of origin.
Y en México, las raíces económicas de la migración se dan generalmente por las recurrentes crisis económicas sexenales ustedes han de saber, y si no lo saben se los voy a decir. En México, cada vez que cambiamos de presidente de la República, es seguro que se viene una crisis sexenal. Ya a veces no sabemos si es por la política económica, el cambio de política económica de cada presidente, o hacerle caso a los rumores que en su momento se dicen y que el presidente se va con las bolsas llenas de México.
So in Mexico, you have the economic roots of migration coming about primarily because of one, the recurring economic crises that happen every 6 years, and some of you may know this, and those of you who don't, I'm going to tell you that every time we change presidents, it's almost sure that we're going to enter into a crisis. And we often don't know if it has to do with the economic policy changes that are happening with the entrance of a new president, or if it's, if we listen or believe the rumors that say that the presidents are leaving office with their bags full of money.
Y las otras causas económicas de la migración, que es la aguda crisis rural y la fallida reconversión industrial y la alta dependencia de las maquiladoras, en las siguientes diapositivas solitas se van a explicar.
And the other causes, like the acute crisis in the countryside, the failed move to industrialize, the high dependence on the maquiladora industries, these are going to explain themselves in the following slides.
Y algunos, si ya vieron la diapositiva, dirán, pues, ¿qué tiene que ver el Tratado de Libre Comercio con la economía y con la pobreza, si se supone que estaba enfocado para erradicar la pobreza en las comunidades o en el país donde se iba a aplicar y que iba a mejorar la cuestión económica de ese país? Eso mismo creíamos nosotros los mexicanos.
Some of you may see this slide and ask, what does the North American Free Trade Agreement have to do with the economic situation or with poverty, if in fact it was supposed to eradicate poverty in the communities and in the country that was part of the trade agreement?
Y creíamos que después de ser tercermundistas, porque así es catalogado económicamente México, íbamos a formar parte del primer mundo.
And so this is what we believed in Mexico. We believed that as part of the third world, because that's how we are cataloged or qualified, that we would become part of the first world.
Igual a los campesinos, como decían que era el Tratado de Libre Comercio, y los campesinos estaban acostumbrados a sembrar y a vender sus excedentes en sus mercados locales, pues con el Tratado de Libre Comercio casi les dijeron, no, pues ahora te vas a convertir en empresario porque ya no vas a vender en el mercado local, ya vas a exportar tus excedentes, lo que te sobre de tu siembra, lo que no vas a aprovechar tú, lo vas a mandar a Estados Unidos.
Mm-hmm. So also with NAFTA, farmers and rural people who were used to, harvesting and selling their surplus in local markets, with NAFTA they were told that they were turned into business people because they would no longer be selling to just local markets, but they would be selling their surplus, what was left over, what they wouldn't use themselves, they would be exporting that to the United States.
Y que consecuencia de lo anterior iba a haber una relación recíproca, que así como entraran empresas a México, iban a entrar empresas a Estados Unidos de México.
Mm-hmm. So as a consequence to this point, that there would be this reciprocal relationship between exports and imports, which also would mean that if companies were entering Mexico from the U.S., that there would also be Mexican companies entering the U.S.
Pero de entrada hay que saber cómo estaba la situación en el campo en México para poder entender por qué no se hizo las exportaciones de México a Estados Unidos y por qué de Estados Unidos a México sí.
So to start, we should look at the situation in the countryside before NAFTA, and so that we can understand why there wasn't that reciprocal relationship of exports the same kind of exports into the U.S. from Mexico.
Y de entrada hay un campo en México en el que la mayoría de los campesinos son los propios dueños o eran los propios dueños de la tierra y ellos mismos invertían en su siembra y además no está tecnificada el campo en México. El campo, la siembra en México es de manera más natural, más orgánica, sin semillas transgénicas, y con un respeto un poco más a la naturaleza. Y en cambio en Estados Unidos la semilla es transgénica, la producción es acelerada y no es una semilla criolla, y además tienen las maquinarias como para sembrar tantas y tantas hectáreas.
In the Mexican countryside, which is a majority of the population of farmers who are or were owners of their own lands, they were investing in their own lands and not using very much technology to cultivate their lands. They were cultivating their lands in a way that was more natural and more organic and without the use of GMO seeds, with a respect to the nature. Well, on the other hand, in the U.S., you do have the use of genetically modified seeds. You have a production that's much more accelerated. You don't have the use of native seeds, and you also have machinery.
Y aunado a lo anterior, en Estados Unidos, cuando empezó lo del Tratado de Libre Comercio, y creo que hasta las últimas fechas, el subsidio a los agroempresarios fue de aproximadamente el 40% del costo total de la producción, mientras que en México fue menos del 10%. Luego entonces, cuando Estados Unidos sacó a vender su producto, o los agroempresarios sacaron a vender su producto al mercado, lo vendieron más barato que los campesinos mexicanos. Y al primero que hicieron quebrar fue al campesino mexicano. Y consecuencia de lo anterior, al ver que no te resulta sembrar como campesino, que lejos de tener una ganancia, le estás invirtiendo a tu siembra y no le estás sacando, pues mejor me voy a Estados Unidos a trabajar en las empresas de las ciudades, o incluso en las mismas empresas que hicieron quebrar al campesino en México.
So connected to this point is the fact that at the beginning of NAFTA, and perhaps up until today, you have the government subsidizing farmers in the U.S. approximately 40% of their cost of production. Well, in Mexico, you have farmers there being subsidized less than 10%. So when big agribusiness sells their products in Mexico, they're selling it at this cheaper price, a price that's cheaper than that of Mexican farmers. And what you have happen is that these farmers go bankrupt. They see that they're not able to make a profit from their sales, and that they can't continue to invest in their lands if they're not seeing a profit. So they decide to go to the U.S. to work in the companies, in the cities, or perhaps even in the very companies that push them into bankruptcy.
Y lejos de tener consecuencias o efectos positivos en el Tratado de Libre Comercio, yo creo que hubo efectos positivos, pero para los grandes empresarios de Estados Unidos y para los grandes empresarios de México, porque aumentaron sus ganancias de ellos, no de los campesinos, ni tampoco de la población de Estados Unidos, ni de los campesinos mexicanos.
So far from having positive effects from NAFTA, we had negative ones. And I think there were positive effects, but they were only for the largest of companies in both Mexico and the US, where they were able to get more profits. But those profits were not for Mexican farmers or for the US population.
Y hubo una entrada deliberada. Cuando se abren las puertas al Tratado de Libre Comercio, entran deliberadamente empresas a México y principalmente maquiladoras. Las maquiladoras que a lo mejor estaban establecidas acá en Estados Unidos se fueron a México al principio, pero no porque quisieran darle empleo a toda la gente de México o por sus buenas intenciones, sino porque era más barato pagar un día de jornal en México que un día de jornal acá en Estados Unidos.
So when you have, the opening up of the doors with this trade agreement, you have sort of the liberalized entry of companies, principally maquiladoras, into Mexico. And perhaps these maquiladoras, these industries were probably established in the US. So they go to Mexico first, not to give jobs to the Mexican people or because they had good intentions, but only because they could pay a Mexican worker a cheaper daily wage than they could pay a US worker.
Y ahora que hay otros países que les pueden pagar más barato incluso que a México, se están yendo a esos otros países.
And now that there's other countries where they could pay those workers even cheaper than what they're paying a Mexican worker, well, now they're going to those countries.
Y además hubo una entrada indiscriminada de productos estadounidenses a México.
And also, on top of this, there was an indiscriminate entry of U.S. products into Mexico.
En Oaxaca, no con orgullo, porque para mí no es un orgullo decirlo, pueden encontrar McDonald's, pueden encontrar Kentucky, pueden encontrar Sam's, pueden encontrar Walmart y otras tantas empresas transnacionales.
Mm-hmm. And in Oaxaca, and I do not say this with pride because it's not a source of pride for me, but there's companies like McDonald's, like KFC, like Sam's, like Walmart, and other transnational companies.
Y yo nada más en el poquito pedacito que estoy recorriendo de Estados Unidos, me he dado cuenta que no hay lugares o empresas donde vendan artesanía mexicana, donde vendan una buena comida mexicana, donde vendan aretes de las artesanas mexicanas, o digo mínimo, encontrar fruta tradicional de México.
Mm-hmm. And in the little time that I've been traveling through the U.S., I haven't seen any places or any companies that sell, for instance, Mexican folk art or good Mexican food, or earrings that are also made by artisans in Mexico, or even at least like native fruit of Mexico.
Y como se darán cuenta, hubo más que entró a México que lo que salió de México. Y producto de haber hecho quebrar al campesino, existen o subieron los índices de migración y se están viniendo a Estados Unidos. Y se van a seguir viniendo mientras no haya un sustento económico con el que puedan lidiar en su propio país, mientras no haya trabajo suficiente para darle de comer a su familia. Porque es escoger a veces entre morirse de hambre allá o hacer el intento, cruzar Estados Unidos y venir a ganar un poco para su familia, o incluso morirse en el intento, porque cuántos no se han muerto en el paso.
Mm-hmm. So as you've seen, with this entrance of products and this bankruptcy of Mexican farmers, we've seen the indexes of migration rise. And people are going to continue migrating as long as there isn't economic sustainability in their country, as long as there aren't jobs in their country, where they can feed their families. So, either they die of hunger in their communities or they attempt, to cross the border and win just enough to support their families. Or perhaps they die, in their attempt to cross the border, which often happens.
Y algunos de Estados Unidos han sufrido, yo creo, los efectos de la migración. El hecho de que venga tanta gente en busca de trabajo acá en Estados Unidos hace que baje las ofertas de trabajo para muchos acá, y la otra, que el exceso de migrantes traiga como consecuencia grandes personas por las ciudades, por los campos, como consecuencia problemas incluso de salud, problemas de grandes amotinamientos en un solo lugar de las personas y tantos problemas, pero también a nosotros como oaxaqueños, como comunidades originarias, como comunidades indígenas, nos está afectando la migración.
So I think there's probably plenty of people who in the U.S. have suffered the effects of migration. Just the amount of people that have come to this country, perhaps lessened the amount of job availability for people in the U.S. Perhaps just overpopulation in cities, perhaps health problems. There could be many problems. But us as Oaxacans, as original populations or native populations, indigenous people, we've also suffered the impacts of migration. Tenemos poco tiempo.
Y de entrada fue el abandono del campo, por lo que ya les expliqué. La pérdida de tradiciones culturales y la desintegración familiar, drogadicción y enfermedades generalmente se dan porque cuando se viene una persona, un joven de la comunidad a una ciudad, lo consume la misma ciudad. O sea, el hecho de que allá no haya tanto de dónde agarrar, cuando llegan a la ciudad, están lejos de su familia, en primera. Pueden entrar en depresiones, extrañar a su familia y pueden empezar a drogarse. Y también lejos de su familia.
So first you have things like the abandonment of the countryside, which I've explained. You also have loss of cultural customs, you have drug addiction, familial disintegration, and disease. And what happens is that migrants come to the cities in the U.S. and they're almost eaten up by the city, while in their communities there just isn't as much to take. There isn't that much accessible there. So in the city, first, they're far from their families. Perhaps this causes them a depression because they miss their family. So then they begin to take drugs.
Y no solamente aprenden a drogarse ellos. Cuando regresan a la comunidad, les enseñan a los jóvenes. Y México, después de haber sido un país en donde solamente la droga pasaba a Estados Unidos, ahora se ha vuelto un país consumidor y la droga se está quedando también en México. Los índices de drogadicción en las comunidades indígenas están subiendo, cosa que no había, al igual que las enfermedades como el VIH.
So not only are they taking drugs themselves, but they're returning to the communities and often sharing the drugs with the youth there. So before you had, Mexico was a country where the drugs passed through before they got to the U.S. But now it's a consumer of drugs. And we've seen that the rates of drug addiction have been rising, and this wasn't something that happened before.
Ya porque el tiempo está corto, creo. Ya nada más les puedo decir que en México estamos trabajando desde las organizaciones sociales por tratar de frenar este fenómeno de migración que tiene un origen, que principalmente es la política económica. Para que haya pobreza tiene que haber un porqué. Anteriormente éramos pobres, y no lo voy a negar, pero a los extremos que se llegó con el Telecán fueron excesivos. Ahora para comprar un kilo de arroz necesita uno 20, 30 pesos, cuando el salario mínimo en Oaxaca es de 50 y tantos pesos. Entonces, con un kilo de arroz y un kilo de frijol ya no te alcanzó para más. Y eso si tienes el salario mínimo. Hay veces que ni el salario mínimo tiene.
In Mexico, we are working within our social organizations, our nonprofit organizations, to halt this phenomenon of migration, which is originating because of economic policy, which is causing poverty. We always need to ask why does this poverty exist? And we've seen that even though we were a poor country, the rates of poverty have become more extreme and excessive with NAFTA. Where now, if you want to buy a kilogram of rice, it costs you like 20 or 30 pesos, when the minimum daily salary is only about 50 pesos. So all you can afford is a kilogram of beans or a kilogram of rice, and your money's gone.
Y que además, como organizaciones, nos manifestamos después de que se había firmado el Tratado de Libre Comercio. En México hubo grandes manifestaciones. Actualmente se están haciendo foros en diferentes lugares de los estados y en diferentes lugares de las comunidades, tratando de hacer ver los impactos que ha tenido el Telecán, y también tratando de hacerle conciencia a la gente de la importancia de consumir nuestros propios productos y de la importancia de que sean orgánicos y no transgénicos como están en los supermercados. Y también el hecho de que la migración es causada por el mismo Telecán y por las mismas ventas, tratando también de que los jóvenes no migren acá, pero es algo que se tiene que hacer en conjunto, que las organizaciones acá también lo tienen que hacer, y es parte también del trabajo de Acción Permanente por la Paz. El hecho de que hoy esté yo acá es un paso que se está dando para hacer conciencia también en ustedes del por qué estamos migrando, y que no es por gusto, que estar lejos de la familia, yo creo que nadie lo quiere hacer, salvo cuando vas a ir de viaje o de paseo.
And what we're also doing is that we've been organizing protests in Mexico, large mobilizations against and calling for the renegotiation of NAFTA. And we're also organizing forums in different states in the country and in communities to help people see what the impacts of NAFTA have been. We're also trying to make people more aware about the importance of consuming our own products that are organic, and not buying products that are often genetically modified that are sold in supermarkets. So we've seen, the relation between NAFTA and migration, and we're also talking to youth or encouraging youth not to migrate. And I think this is work that needs to happen in a joint way with organizations in the U.S. And I think it is already happening, and Witness for Peace is an example of this. And they've taken this step of inviting me to come here and talk to you, and also help, make you aware of why we're migrating, because it's definitely not not for fun. It's not because we want to, because no one wants to be away from their family.
I just want to underline really briefly a couple of things that Paula said, and she just basically concluded with the essential points that we must be looking at the economic policies behind migration if we're actually going to be looking at migration. And this is something that is really important right now. The migration debate in this country has been going on for a little while. and it's a debate that's likely to resurge in this coming year. Right now, the only debate seems to be healthcare, but there are several bills on the table coming up regarding migration, domestic migration policy, that will be coming up this next year. And so it's going to be a debate. But I would put out to you the question of, of the proposals on the table for migration reform, which one of them addresses anything that Paula just talked about? I mean, anything from building that border wall another 10 feet higher, to having a supposed guest worker program, to even declaring amnesty. None of them really actually address the roots of migration. None of them address that essential question of why people come. And for us, this is key. I mean, as long as you do not address the fact that people are having to make a decision between, not feeding their children and migrating, they're going to opt for the latter. And so we are definitely for migration reform. Don't get me wrong. Witness for Peace is for. This is a broken migration system we have in this country. We must reform it. We must stop the raids in these factories in upstate New York. We must stop the raids on the farm workers. But we can't forget about the raiding of Mexico's countryside through NAFTA. We can't forget about the raiding that resulted in over 2 million farming families throughout the Mexican countryside that were displaced and left with very few alternatives to migration. Trade reform must accompany immigration reform. That's our essential point. We must be looking at the root economic policies. And to do that is not, once again, a hypothetical ask. The Trade Act is the first bill in Congress that would renegotiate NAFTA. How many people have heard of the Trade Act? Just a handful. The Trade Act is the first bill that we have in Congress that would open up for revamping this entire model. NAFTA, CAFTA, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, every free trade agreement the United States has ever signed would be opened up. What it does is it mandates that Congress sit down and do an analysis of what has been the 15-year legacy of NAFTA. To what extent has NAFTA driven people out of jobs here in upstate New York? To what extent has NAFTA allowed pharmaceutical companies to go into other countries and force patents on generic medicines, thus driving up the cost of health care? To what extent has NAFTA done exactly what Paula was talking about, facilitated agricultural dumping in countries like Mexico? To what extent has NAFTA been to blame for the increasing migration trends, which have more than doubled since 1994 when it was passed? That analysis has not been done in that way, that serious of a way, and it must be. And to the extent that NAFTA, CAFTA, and the rest of them fall short, they must be renegotiated. It mandates that that report be given to the administration, and the administration must renegotiate this free trade model, which for us is a huge step. This would mean the unraveling of something that has meant largely destruction for the majority for these last 15 years. The majority is now with us. The last polls, over 56% said they were opposed to NAFTA in this country, so we're not in the minority anymore. We're in a position to win. And that's why this bill is also in a position to win. It's got 123 co-sponsors in Congress right now. So it's not some fringe hippie bill out there. My apologies to the fringe hippies in the audience. But it's a bill that's actually going places. It has over 120 co-sponsors at this point, and we could use a few more. And so what we're trying to do is collect thousands of signatures from across the country on this petition. And it reads, I urge you to take a more comprehensive approach to immigration by repealing the failed NAFTA model, which provokes forced migration, and replacing it with a justice-oriented model. Please start by co-sponsoring the Trade Act.